thank you so much for chatting with us. You've just inaugurated a new manufacturing facility in India. This is the 6th such facility that you've inaugurated in India. What makes you optimistic on the India story at a time when most strategic foreign investors are shying away from making fresh investments?
We're looking, as AKZO NOBEL, at India as one of the clear growth stories of the future. We're not looking at it on a quarter or a yearly basis. We're looking at it from a 5 to 10 year horizon. And we look at the paints and coatings market, where we are the largest player worldwide, really at a market that is in the fundamental starting stages. It's a large market today, but if we look at the per capita consumption, we see that it has a tremendous potential, which is why we do long-term investments like additional factories, long-term investments in the product lines, in distribution networks, and we'll continue to do so.
So help us understand the significance of this investment that you've made, the 6th such facility. What does it really bring to the table for AKZO NOBEL India?
What it brings to the table for AKZO NOBEL is an additional facility manufacturing decorative paints, paints that you and me use when we apply it in our houses. That is where we support the Indian market, and what we've done here is we've taken a state-of-the-art manufacturing technology, not previously generations, but the newest generation. It is one of the newest and highest generation factories for AKZO NOBEL in the world, and with that are trying to address the Indian market with a new set of products with new sustainability advantages for our customers. And that is what this factory is doing for us and with us.
But do you think all the noise around, around the slowdown in growth, governance deficit, does that not disturb you when you're when you're putting money on the table, when you're looking at India in the medium to long-term point of view? Do you not get upset by the fact that there is so much of, negative, so to say, environment around for investment in India, which is why a lot of your peers aren't investing? Does that not bother you?
Well, as I said, what we do is look at the long-term aspects of India, and then it's not so bad to act counter-cyclical. Right, to actually invest when other people are not investing, because it allows us to build things that are really looking at 3 to 5 to 10 years and making sure that a growth that definitely will happen and that will not be disturbed by smaller fluctuations in individual years or quarters, that growth is something that we can capitalize on.
So the bet is on growth, that you believe that India as a market, by virtue of its size and by virtue of a billion-plus consumers, is something that will keep growing at a consistent pace, unlike a lot of other emerging markets?
What we've seen is that if we compare the per capita consumption of paints and coatings in the country, and we compare it not with Europe, not with North America, but with other growth countries in the region, we see that there's a tremendous potential out there. We see that it is already a large market today, but it can easily double in the next 7 to 10 years. It actually has all potential to do so. It has all components in it, which is why we believe this has been a very good investment to build that future.
And you're not perturbed by the fact that the lack of an enabling environment for that growth to happen, or do you think it will get there eventually?
It will get there. My experience with India, traveling here almost 20 years, is that there's been a lot of fluctuations and volatility, but in reality, it's continued to grow. And even in times that it's been growing slower than in their best years, it's always continued to grow, and it's continued to grow very largely on the basis of a domestic market. And that domestic market is what we're aiming at for the vast majority of our products.
I want to talk a little bit about the slowdown that we're seeing right now in India, which seems to be a little protracted one, and one that not many expected or many were budgeting for. What kind of an impact are you seeing that have on your business in the near term? Do you see a cut in discretionary spends at all?
What we do see is that, indeed, as you mentioned, growth has come down. And that reduction of growth we've seen largely in the urban areas, less so in the rural areas, where we've seen growth continue. And we've seen it a little bit on the construction side activities, which is a large segment for AKZO NOBEL. In other areas, we've seen some hesitation, and that wait-and-see approach, where everybody has been informing me that they expect that to stop at the time of next year's election. That wait-and-see approach is, of course, a breathing time that we see affecting most aspects of the economy. But it's clear for us that it's not hurting the long-term potential of the Indian market. And therefore, we don't create a big doubt at this point in time towards India. We believe that, yes, there's a temporary wait-and-see approach that is not damaging the conviction that we have for long-term growth.
In the industrial segment, do you see some pain in segments like infrastructure, automotive? Do you see that through as well?
Well, we see limited pain, but we see certainly a reduction in growth. Right? So we don't see contraction of any kind, but we see a reduction of growth. So that same wait-and-see approach we see in the industrial segment as well.
Between the industrial side and the decorative side, where do you see more potential in a market like India? Do you think it will be a while before you get significant returns from the industrial side?
At the moment, 2/3 of our business is on the decorative side of the business.
Exactly.
Right? So that's been the largest part of our presence in India. If you look globally, the other two businesses are actually larger than the decorative side of the business. So that tells you how much of a potential these other two businesses have, which today are partially underrepresented where we are over here. So I think the future for the industrial side of the businesses is still out there, whereas on the decorative side of the business, we also see significant growth, but we're over proportionally present here in India.
Is this a function of the stage of a market as well, that the more developed a market is, it's obviously the industrial segment which will yield more revenues?
Yeah, and of course it has to do with the manufacturing base, right? So countries that have an over proportionally large manufacturing base driven towards export, they generally have, of course, more of a business-oriented presence, also from AKZO NOBEL. But what you see here in India is, of the growth that has been taking place over the last many, many years, a large part of that growth has been the domestic economy. So the industry that's been serving the domestic economy, the decorative paints business is a big domestic economy serving business, has been the largest.
Let's talk about the journey in India as well. DULUX is obviously a big brand in the luxury space. Would you now look at consciously developing stronger brands in the mid space as well, because that's also potentially a huge market for you?
Yeah, DULUX is a very powerful brand, and that brand is very much a premium brand, and we constantly innovate with products that serve that premium market. But our aim is to focus on both the premium and the mid-market segments in the Indian economy, which is also one of the targets that we have with the new factory that we have opened yesterday. So the combination of premium and mid-tier is what we're going to be driving, either with DULUX brands or supporting brands under DULUX.
So do you have a strategy in place in terms of how many supporting brands you'd look to bring to the market? By when would you look to do that?
Yeah, and you can do that with a single brand and different supporting sub-brands,
okay.
Or you can do it with distinctly different brands. But today, I guess we're very much focusing on building it, supporting the DULUX brand going forward.
A lot of the analysts that we speak to believe that despite the despite the strong potential of the Indian unit, the fact is that they have not been able to ramp up margins as much as people would have liked, given the global backing and given the levers that exist for a company that has a parent like AKZO NOBEL. Would you agree with that assessment? Is there scope to for more levers to be pulled as far as margins are concerned in the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, since AKZO NOBEL has been driving the business in the last 4 years that we've been here, pretty much the market capitalization of the organization has doubled. Right? And that's been very different from the period prior to that. In that 4 years, we've been primarily focused on building the foundations for growth. And that is what you've seen, of course. Those foundations have now been built, which means that we're now switching our focus to getting a return on those investments. So there's a growth focus, there's a return on investment focus after a period of building the foundations.
So in the medium term, would it be fair to say that now that you've put in all the investments, now that you seem to have laid the foundation, will margins pick up significantly?
We will certainly drive growth, and we will drive return on investment, which will be done by improving our margins.
We did speak about margin levers. Do you think one of them is developing raw materials indigenously? Is that something that that you'd actively consider as well as something that could help potentially push up margins?
Well, the paints and coatings industry has some raw materials that will continue to come from abroad simply because they're not available. Right? So they're really raw materials.
So there is no ecosystem.
Like there's no ecosystem. They're not available. So it's not a matter of manufacturing them here. It's just that the actual raw materials, like certain pigments, are not available in the country. Others, I guess we are working together with suppliers, and we very much yesterday as well, during the opening of our new facilities, invited suppliers to say, come with us, come near us, let's build these partnerships to accommodate that growth together, and that's something that we'll continue to do moving forward.
But is that more of a long-term plan? I mean, could we see some results of that initiative in the near term, or do you think it'll take a while for that to
It will always take a while, because most of these raw materials that we buy go associated with significant investments from our suppliers. So they certainly will make their assessments of what's possible. We as a customer will very much want to help them there where possible. And it is, however, something that was not a short-term 12-month thing. It'll take a couple of years before you fundamentally change your supply base to a domestic environment.
The other thing that I want to talk about is the management reshuffle that we've seen in the India unit, and Amit is obviously moving to a larger role out of India. What plans do you then have? Are we likely to see a new team in place? By when do you see that coming through, and what's the process?
Well, what you've seen is the power of our Indian talent. And it's one of the reasons to be in India as well. You have a fantastic talent base. And we have many of them attracted to our organization. The actual merger that has made the combined company a full-line supplier in the industry has attracted even more talent. And that talent doesn't have only opportunities in India itself. You see that we as AKZO NOBEL are very much looking forward to using that talent in other places in the world. And Amit, as one of the persons that is going to take a very significant role in Europe, is just one example of many that are making careers outside of the country. And I would say that's the power of India. That's the part that I enjoy so much. That is, it really gives me a kick to see people growing outside of India and making a difference for the organization overall. And we'll build the team here on the basis of the next layer of talent that we have there. So the country is so rich of talent that we don't even have to worry, because we have people in the organization that will actually be able to come up to the next challenge here as well.
So it's quite likely that the next CEO would be someone from the existing establishment in the Indian unit.
Well, the decision, of course, is made by the board and the management, and I will very much leave it to their capable hands.
I mean,
but I look at the organization as an organization with a tremendous amount of talent in the house.
What's the strategy to run a business in India? You know, sitting in Europe, we've seen some unsavory examples, companies like Reebok, Adidas, who kind of got it wrong. There was a huge disconnect between the way the the global office wanted them to work and the way the Indian unit worked. And we've seen that with a lot of companies actually. What's the best way to run the Indian unit? Should you just have a strong CEO who runs it differently, or should there be blanket rules for all units? Because India is a unique market. It cannot be clubbed probably with other emerging markets. That's the sense that we get. But what is your own experience? What is your learning, and how do you go about it?
India has a large amount of specific challenges that are really unique for India. And that is very similar for other countries. So we at AKZO NOBEL are not a company that says we do the same rules everywhere and we want everything to be run the same way in many places. We basically believe in a clear set of goals set from the central executive teams that we have, and then give sufficient liberty and entrepreneurial freedom to the talents on the ground to adapt it to what is right for the domestic market. And that's very much what has made AKZO NOBEL successful in India, but also in many other countries. It's the combination of trust in the talent that you have and clear direction, clear boundaries within which people can operate, but still have sufficient freedom to make a difference.
But you're known as a hands-on CEO. Whatever I've read about you, everyone says that you're a hands-on CEO. So how hands-on are you with the Indian unit then?
What I do when I travel, right? And that's, I think, what people call hands-on in that interpretation, is I always visit customers. I always walk through the factories and the facilities. I am a CEO who has been running sales offices, who has been running factories, and can actually help in the sparring to make things better. But I would never overrule a local management team in doing things. I'm a sparring partner when it comes to hands-on. I'm a co-driver of growth and profitability, because we at AKZO NOBEL have so many global processes, places where we do things smartly, that we can easily learn from each other in the group, and as a result drive a better business. And I want to be very much part of it, as much as I expect my executive committee to be part of it, including the managers in India itself.
A couple of other issues that I want to talk about. One is this whole buzz of delisting. Every now and then there's this buzz that the company may look at delisting from the markets here in India. Is that something that's been considered, is being considered, will be considered? What is the status on that?
AKZO NOBEL is happy as a publicly quoted company in India. So we truly believe it has a strategic merit as well, in terms of the image it creates, the talent it attracts, the sparring sessions we have with investors. So we are truly happy being a publicly quoted company and have no significantly active discussions in the board going on, as far as I'm aware, when it comes to any form of delisting.
I also want to talk a little bit about the global market and how you are looking at how you're looking at the global market. We've seen the US shutdown, which was a bit of a dampener and probably was a little longer than what people expected. And questions are being now raised on growth in the US in the near term. What is your sense of the situation on the ground? Do you think we're likely to see strong signs of growth picking up in the US market?
When we see the United States, we have seen growth return. and we've seen growth return independent of the government shutdowns and the political discussions that are happening in Washington. So the underlying economy sees some recovery taking place, very much both on the industrial side and on the consumer side of our businesses. So we do see, independent of the political discussions going on, that the United States sees a return to growth that is not just a weak return to growth, but is actually quite a fundamental return to growth. Now, it's not the growth levels that we see in India or in China or in other countries, but it is a fundamentally returned growth level that I guess many have been waiting for quite some time.
What about Europe? Do you think the worst is, and you'll have probably a better idea of what's going on there than anyone else. Do you think the worst is over? And do you think now we're seeing some signs of pickup in demand, even in the paints market?
Well, if you look at Europe in general, you've seen some stabilization taking place in the third quarter. And that means that at least the worst contraction that we've seen in many countries seems to be over. We actually seen some return of growth in the southern countries, of course not to the levels of the past, but that of course is a positive signal, and we've seen a stabilization in the north. So what we're seeing in Europe is that the contraction that people have been so worried about for an extended period of time seem to have stopped, and the first signs of growth, albeit still weak, are starting to pop up. And again, that of course are positive signs for the global economy overall.
So when do you think we'll hit that inflection point where US will be growing pretty rapidly, Europe would have turned around, so to say, and emerging markets would have also hit their sort of equilibrium, so to say? When do you see that happening?
Well, we've always said 2013 would not be the year where that happens yet. And whereas others have believed differently, so far we've been largely proven right in that assessment. And therefore we've been focusing on cleaning up our own house when it comes to making ourselves more efficient and better. For 2014, we do see that the fundamental growth that we've seen popping up in the US will strengthen itself, whereas Europe will see a return to growth. And that may be towards the back end of 2014.
But what will drive growth for AKZO NOBEL over the next 5 years? Will it be a return to growth in the US, or will it be a powerful growth in emerging markets, or do you think will it be the turnaround in Europe? What is the most critical for your company?
What we have today is about 44% of our revenue coming out of the growth markets. Right? And those growth markets will continue to grow faster than the mature markets. The result will be that we'll be trending towards the 50 pretty quickly. And that's a nice balanced approach of the company, where we have 50% of our business in the growth markets and 50% in the mature markets. The growth is indeed going to be driven by the United States fundamentally growing again compared to the past, Europe probably growing at a slower rate, and the growth markets returning back to levels that we've seen partially in the past, maybe a little bit less, but certainly more than what we see today.
I have to ask you this because everyone keeps making this comparison between India and China. What is your sense? Which is a market that you think is something that will deliver you consistent returns on a long-term basis between India and China? How do you compare the two markets?
Also here, it's not a choice of either or. Right?
Sure.
It is a choice of we want to be in both. Right? What we've seen that the centralist-driven action items in the Chinese government and economy have helped a very pasty way forward and a very predictable way to growth in many of the industries that the industry's support from the government policies have benefited from. Right? India, of course, has been a more volatile growth pattern. Right? The great advantage of India is that of the growth, the vast majority piece has been the domestic market. Whereas from a country like China, you've seen the vast majority of growth coming out of the export markets. Now, China, of course, is trying to change, but India already has that domestic market that is a big driver for future growth, and that's the one we want to benefit from. But some of that volatility that you've seen, I guess we've much less seen in China, which shows that the predictability has been better there. And some of that predictability would certainly help in terms of the expectation, in terms of foreign direct investment appetite. That predictability has helped them and potentially would help India as well.
Finally, Ram, you're someone who's walked the talk on India. Even though you sound very optimistic, you sound as if you bet on the India story. You've also traveled across India. You like the country. You like being here. What is it about India that really attracts you a lot? You personally, you've traveled the length and breadth of the country, I'm told. What is it about India that you like the most? What are the memories that you cherish?
The memories I cherish are multifold, but the best memories I always cherish from the start have been the people of India. And it was quite worrisome to see about a year ago how for the first time in the 20 years that I've been in India, I saw the moods getting a little bit negative. Right? And that was the first time in 20 years, because no matter what happened in India, people always stayed positive, always had a can-do attitude, always wanted to drive the country further, always said, despite the volatility and the lack of predictability, we'll make this the best country in the world. And that passion in the people is always something that touches me, and I'm really happy now that I'm back here to see that positive passion and the glimster in the eyes to be back.
And what is your favorite travel destination in India? Since you have traveled so much, what's the one part in India that you like the most?
It's impossible to choose, like it is between countries. But I've enjoyed anything from the Tamil Nadu areas all the way to a favorite destination for me, which would be the area around Ajanta and Ellora, as in terms of the temples that I've enjoyed a lot. When I, in the early days, traveled there virtually on my own, enjoying the peacefulness and the actual historical heritage that the country carries.
Right. Speaking to you was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.